Whenever he's gotten into policy trouble, you see that what he does is he puts another, what I call another kilo of pure uncut white supremacy on the table for his followers to snort up. Trump came to the political fore on a platform of pure uncut white supremacy.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists.
So we know that this was who he was coming into it. I think what scared a lot of researchers and reporters and people who are witnessing his election is how he's taken his rhetoric and put it into policies. Immediately after Donald Trump was elected, we saw one of the first executive orders he had signed was his Muslim travel ban.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on.
The Obama administration, created a rule that was going to try to equalize the presence of low-income housing in suburban communities. And the Trump administration reverses that rule.
Suburban women, will you please like me? Remember? Please. I saved your damn neighborhood, okay?
You see it where he's talking about, we don't want all of these folks coming in from these old countries. Why can't they come in from Norway?
The fact that the president is, has asked to eliminate bias training in federal agencies.
We were paying people hundreds of thousands of dollars to teach very bad ideas and frankly very sick ideas. And really, they were teaching people to hate our country.
If we look at the handling of the pandemic and we look at its disproportionate effects in communities of color, where Black and brown and indigenous communities are contracting the disease at higher rates, getting hospitalized at higher rates, and or dying at higher rates.
In the midst of the pandemic, in the meatpacking plants, where what he does is he compels the workers who are overwhelmingly immigrants to go back into those disease-infested spaces while providing protection for the employers so that they cannot be sued for not providing the protection for their workers. It feels like he's mocking Black people when he says,
I've done more for Black Americans than anybody with the possible exception of Abraham Lincoln.
If we look at the tone that President Trump created with his incendiary rhetoric, one of the places where we should look is in, the number of incidents against people of color.
We've seen that hate crimes against Muslims and the Jewish community as well has skyrocketed over the last few years. The FBI's own data continues to tell us so. We're seeing the rise in the normalization of white supremacists who continue to say openly that they want essentially a race war.
You will not replace us! You will not replace us!
These are people that the president has continued to refuse to condemn.
Some very bad people in that group, but you also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
So
who would you like me to condemn?
White supremacists and right
Proud Boys, stand back and stand by.
We see it when it comes to the first two Muslim congresswomen, right? The attacks that we see on Ilhan Omar.
She hates our country. She comes from a place that doesn't even have a government. And then she comes here, she tells us how to run our country.
And this has become a tactic for other GOP members and other lawmakers to run on hate, because the tone is that this is not just acceptable, but it's a winnable strategy.
A Palestinian Mexican millennial Democrat named Amar Campa-Najjar doesn't get his support from the people of San Diego.
Despite the racist rhetoric that we've seen happening over the last few years, we've also seen a rise and a pushback from people on the ground. I mean, we saw it immediately after the Muslim ban. Hundreds and thousands of people storm into the airports, acting as translators, lawyers who were looking to find, help folks who are just landing.
What we typically see is after an election, folks go, whew, I've done my civic duty. and then they go back to their lives. But democracy requires continued civic engagement. That is going to be absolutely essential for getting this democracy on course.
Racism, Islamophobia, and xenophobia didn't begin with this presidency, but it was a rude awakening for maybe even allies who maybe diminished the civil rights concerns that marginalized communities had, who maybe didn't take racism as seriously, who maybe didn't think Islamophobia was a real problem. And I think this is something that we're seeing is slowly changing. And only the future is really going to tell how much of a learning lesson will take the last 4 years.